Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Art Business Podcast. My name's David Bellingham. I'm Programme Director of the Master's degree in Art Business at Sotheby's Institute of Art, London. And my guest today is Marek Claaßen, who is currently based in Berlin, and he's the founder of a web platform called ArtFacts.net, which provides information and analysis of artists and galleries, including world rankings. And we'll dig deeper into that later in the podcast. So, Marek, you're very welcome. Could we begin by asking you how you first became aware of art? So, for example, did you grow up surrounded by art and/or artistic people? And then maybe at what point did you decide to eventually pursue a career in the art world?
Yeah, first of all, David, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and
You're very
that we have
welcome.
the power to talk. I grew up in a middle class environment. My parents, or my father was a doctor, and his father too. And they were collecting German expressionism and fantastic realism. My parents did. To become a doctor, you're not, your main interest is not like getting rich. I mean, some are, but it wasn't in our family. You do this because you have a feeling and an imagination towards what you want to do. And this was how I was raised, and what the images that have been on the wall around me also telling me, like feeling over realism. This is German expressionism and fantasy, surreal dreamlike works from Friedensreich Hundertwasser, who took a lot of, I think, drugs to LSD back in the days, right? To get beyond his Über-Ich and to see more. So this was my childhood. And then later I was playing in a band. This brought me to Berlin. And this band was a band that was not a usual thing because we had a visual department and a lyrics department. There were lots of American and there, Jewish people, black people. That was not normal for Berlin during this time in Kreuzberg. And so we had masks and lots of visuals. And so I was also during my young years involved in that. And later then I did an apprenticeship in one of the major German galleries. And of course, then I was surrounded by art again, right? So this I was funneled into that world, if you want to.
So, in terms of like school and college, could you talk about did you study at university alongside these activities?
I mean, I, I, I was a drop off in my early years. So when I became a musician, I didn't go to school anymore.
Oh,
And when I realized that that I will never become a composer because I couldn't write notes and stuff, I asked my parents to let's help me to get my foot again into the normal world, and let me uh, study, right? And so they helped me, and I completely cut off my creative past and did this apprenticeship then in this
I see.
gallery, what was one of the co-founders of the Art Cologne in 1967. So this was a very influential German gallery that was working on the cross border between East and West Germany. So they were exhibiting a lot of East German artists. So the West German political scene was a common guest there, and they introduced both worlds, and East German artists painted the German Chancellor at this time, Schmidt. And this was all facilitated by the gallery where I did this apprenticeship in the 80s, right? The Cold War, shortly before the wall fell down. I mean, shortly is like a decade before. So
Mm.
this was the time when I was doing that. And afterwards, I thought I'm clever and I studied business administration instead of art history, to cut, to have a shortcut. And I can employ people who have all this knowledge. And through my studies, I became more aware of theoretical background of statistics, of programming and all that.
Sure. No, and we'll talk more perhaps later on about Art Cologne because I think the listeners, I think that's a story that has got partly forgotten. I
Mhm.
think because of what you've just said about the history of like East and West Germany and until the fall of the wall. So, and of course, Art Cologne is the world's first contemporary art fair, I believe, and I think we could return to that later on. But to start with, let's cut to the quick and talk about ArtFacts. So perhaps you could tell us more about the founding of ArtFacts. I think in the new millennium, early in the new millennium in 2001. So
Mhm.
what led you to the development of this platform? And maybe you could tell us what it is and what makes it different from other art databases and web platforms.
So as I said, so this interest in IT and art co-developed. It was, in the 80s, the first personal computers appeared, and my boss, Dieter Brusberg, the gallerist, asked the youngest person in the crowd, can spread your wings and check out the landscape of gallery administration software. So I stumbled upon this guy called Professor Klemm. He was on the University der Künste of Arts in Berlin. And as a hobby, he was programming database-driven databases with this software around running a gallery. And so I was really hooked with this subject. Yeah. And the other subject was Kunstvermittlung. It's a German word for art education, art mediation, or art facilitation, whatever you want to say. So this is the process of making art accessible to people. This is one of the main jobs of a gallerist who is distinct from an art dealer, who, the gallerist wants to promote future tastes, right? So he's an arbitrageur, if you want, who bets on a future taste and who wants to build that taste in society, and then of course later cash in if he's right. So these both spheres were very, very interesting to me. And when I finished, when I did my MA, Master in Business Administration, it was 1994, and the World Wide Web appeared with the first browsers. And I bought a book on Learn HTML in 5 days.
I think I did that as
It's
well.
one of these stories, right? And then I taught myself, to make a website. And with this thing, I went with some mock-ups to the guys that organized the first Berlin Art Dealer Association, and this was to be founded in 1996. So I went there with my mock-ups and talked them into, letting me build that. And I built a database-driven website and won a prize for the first 5% best German websites right away with that thing. And so, they put me forward to the German Art Dealer Association, to the Federation of European Art Galleries Associations in Paris, to Art Cologne, and we made lots of things in the late 90s together. And this was also the time when ArtNet did an IPO, and eBay evolved, and the gallery scene was quite nervous, and they wanted to, showcase something. They wanted to showcase the diversity of the European art galleries landscape. And this is what I did with the Federation of European Art Galleries Associations. I, talked them into, let's make a platform where all the associations can upload their activities. And we published this, and this is a great showcase against the evil auction world and all that. And so, yes, we started this, and in 2000 was the dot-com crash. Probably maybe some of your listeners will still remember. It was quite a severe crash.
Mm.
So we lost everything. I lost everything, and we also lost funding for ArtFacts. And
Wow,
then,
that's quite
then
interesting because when sorry to interrupt, but when you yeah, I remember that in the news obviously, but you never saw the kind of micro details that you just spoken about, the effect it had on all over the world. You only heard about it in Silicon Valley in the main news. So it's just
Yeah.
awful to
So
hear
our
how
main sponsor was Deutsche Telekom, yeah, and Deutsche Telekom wanted to use the content we were creating, the art-related content, to convince their board of the internet. Because you
yeah,
have to see, there was no internet in the 90s. And so
absolutely.
even the Deutsche Telekom management wanted to convince their board that they should go full into internet and so on. Yeah, and so they have been actually but they pulled out right away. So they pulled out from one day to another out of this endeavor, right? And this was killing us. And the German Art Dealer Association never found a new someone new who can jump in. So I asked my partner Stine, let's use this. And it was also an accident because one of the people I'm working with, because I did other things as well, said, Marek, there's an audience, there's people using it. We shouldn't stop it. And then I became a publisher. I never wanted to be, right? I
Mm.
had no, I was afraid of being a publisher because when you publish something, you have people that are not agreeing with your position, and you throw it out to the world, and so you might get a headwind, right? So we did that and stick to it. And you wanted to know what's different, right? And what
So
I think.
So
Mhm.
your so the gallery's website, which gave information about galleries, which is still a significant part of ArtFacts, that completely went, and then you decided to use your knowledge to.
Beginning it didn't went. So we still work with some associations that
Yeah.
uploaded stuff by themselves. So it was,
Oh, I
if you
see.
will, very first
Yeah.
Web2 application because they could enter their information by themselves. We
Yeah.
switched that off later then because we also wanted more control then over the years.
Yes.
And there was one thing that I think that really stands out by describing artifacts for everything else that is out there, or maybe not everything else, but what is very, very special about it, this is factuality.
Yes.
So this was a shared understanding among us of what is true, and that this is very, very important, and that factuality is not the same thing as information. Yeah, we are bombarded with information based upon what a profit-making entity thinks will attract your attention. Yeah, but the things that are given to us to attract our attention are not the things we need to know, right?
Very
We need to
interesting.
know when we want to do some serious investigations and want to, know something about an artist. There are these attention seekers that divert our attention. But if you really want to go into that and bring your life into it by putting money on the table or time or whatever, lifetime, then you should know what you're doing and you should know where you put it. So factuality was always, since the very beginning of ArtFacts, the driver. And then that lead to all the other things that were coming, like the rankings and the comprehensive database,
Yes.
what we did with Limner later, we will speak about that, the
Mm.
price estimations, and so all this is all about actually the subject.
So you spoke earlier about the difference between a gallerist and a dealer. The gallerist is there to invest in potential artists who one day will become will be selling. That's the first point. There's no point in having artists that don't sell. And then they sell locally, and then they sell nationally, and then eventually they sell internationally. But the gallerist's role is to nurture that relationship with the artist. It's a symbiotic relationship. And the the maybe with art facts, maybe you could tell us about the the origins. I remember when you first lectured to us about the platform at the Institute, you had this slide where you spoke about this Marxist theorist and his theories of capital and investment. Maybe you could tell us about that theory and how you used that methodology and transposed it to the art world.
Yeah. okay, this is the theory of fame from Georg Frank.
Yes.
And I came to Frank, you know, when I finished my master's, I thought I stay in the world of economics, and I became a member of the cultural here of the ICAF. It's called Institution for International Economics of and Art. Maybe I forgot the real name. ICAF it's called. I think I met several people, and I think I got in touch with Sotheby's Institute through that. And there's some people I know are still in there. But I was really interested, and I thought I could do something in that field also on an academic level, because I did an apprenticeship, like learning actually by how to be a gallerist, then doing business administration, understanding about how running a business management and all that works. And so the big picture was very interesting to me. And then I stumbled upon Muses and Markets by Pomerine and Fry. Pomerine was a professor at Free University where I studied of economics. And they did this, they integrated a thing called Kunstkompass,
Yes.
which looked at artist fame and correlated this with auction data to have some kind of predictor of an artist trajectory. And so I was very interested in this Kunstkompass. This was designed by Willy Bongard in 1970. And he believed quality of art can't be measured, but resonance can. And so he sent out questionnaires to people to give points for exhibitions, and he came up with this ranking about, attention, if you want. I didn't know this word back then, but about success in the primary art market in terms of consideration by gallerists and so on. And as I realized then that there's these two things of the coins, right? The number part, which is the auction record, facts again about pricing, and also facts about exhibitions. And but I wanted to have something more fundamental to it. So I wanted a philosophy, right? I wanted to just have an idea is one thing, but the idea has to be based on a certain thinking that is as the ground, if you want, the soil where it all grows on. And I stumbled upon the economy of attention by Frank. And this was done in the late 90s. And the attention economy was a great subject back then in the 90s. Everybody was talking about this. And the theory emphasized that attention is a powerful motivator, surpassing wealth and power. And that it operates as an economy within the mechanisms of, or similar to capitalism. And this was very important to me because I wanted to measure this other thing in the art that is unmeasurable, if you want. Not the price. I wanted to measure the other, the content part, the cultural significance, as we call it today. But I needed something that can make it operate under the same conditions as an auction and all our market behavior, right? So and he stated that there are three basic mechanisms that run capitalism. This is property, lending money, and charging interest. And so the bridge was that the property is, if you want, still the property. It's the actual locality of the gallery, the museum, whatever, the off space. You need a space, you need white walls. And you give this to artists, you're kind of lending money, yeah, and you expect a return in terms of more attention for your museum, gallery, whatever. So it's a trade-off, but it's the same thing in the end without a flow of money, but like the flow of money. Yeah, you have a property, you lend this property to an artist, and you expect return of attention through this exhibition. And so this is then what gave me this background, that I understood attention as a form of currency. Yeah, and this led then in the end to measuring and ranking attention within the art world, our ranking system. Yeah, and this aimed to reflect how attention and reputation drives the cultural economy. That was basically it.
Yes, and we can use different words like I often refer to it as fame on your art when I'm talking to students about art facts. So it's a measure of the artist's fame, but we can use words, as you say, the original word was attention, presumably based on a translation of an original German word. It was
Yeah,
Frank writing in German.
yes, it's an Austrian guy.
An Austrian,
Yeah.
oh, in Austrian, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I wouldn't use that anymore because, when I think about attention, I think about social media, followers,
Yes,
all that. It's a popular voting, if you want. It's people like that. This is why you have
yes,
lots of followers. But what we are actually measuring is the cultural significance. This is in the end not the critic, it's the curator's point of view. What is based on different, so the curator, let's say, more formal way of looking at art, incorporating history and the content that the work delivers, whereas the populace looks if they like it or not, and these can differ quite a lot, right? And the market, from my point of view, goes more into the direction of populace. Banksy and so on is liked, so people pay a lot of money for it, but Banksy doesn't play the same role in the cultural environment. He wishes to, this is why he invades Tate Modern and stuff, but he doesn't, right? And so this doesn't need to meet, right? So this cultural significance can be very unpopular. You know what I mean? It
yes.
can be highly ranked in our system, but nobody wants to have it because the content is awful. It looks disgusting.
Yeah, I was,
Contribute to the history.
yeah, I mean, as an example of that, I was taking students around Take Britain the other day, and I was given those as examples. So I was talking in terms of you know I was actually referring to ArtFacts actually and its criteria for ranking. And I was saying if we look at art price, which measures the auction success or not of an artist over a period of time, there are certain artists in there that are doing relatively well in the market. Maybe people like Peter Doig, the young British artists that are now selling internationally and selling on the secondary market. Rachel White-Reed to a certain extent, and then I took them in. Then I took them into a Cornelia Parker uh, exhibit, and I said, do you think that this artist does as well on the market as these people who are painting these very attractive canvases and so on? And not the obvious answer is, well, how are you going to commodify that kind of idea? And I said, and yet if we look at ArtFacts, you'll see that that artist is actually relatively well ranked compared to the artists that are commercially successful. It's because your ArtFacts rankings are looking at their presence in established gallery exhibitions and shows with other established artists. So it's ranking the cultural fame of those artists, whether they appear in Tate, in recognized museums, as well as alpha galleries, commercial galleries and art fairs and biennales and so on. And it's a very, very interesting relationship between those artists that rank highly on the market, but not so highly culturally. And I think generally speaking, that is what happens. But when it's interesting is when there's kind of overlaps. I've had
Yes,
students doing dissertations on this before.
this is what I call then sustainable, because when you meet with your art both worlds, then you are then you are all set, because then you have the populist vote, but you also have the integrity within the former appreciation of art and your place in art history. So I think that is an achievement which is very seldom. And this speaks for artists which are in the end timeless, where old masters like Dürer or something, this rabbit you can look at, hundreds of years later, and it's still nice. Yeah, and it's attractive from a popular viewpoint, but it's also attractive from an art historical viewpoint. And
which,
this
which
is the number of artists. What? Sorry.
sorry, no, but which is I was just going to, which is why the top artists in both rankings, financial and cultural value, tend to be Andy Warhol and Picasso.
Yes.
Because they're validated in all the big museums and by the populace, as you say, but they were also prolific, so there's plenty of supply for the demand for their work. So they tend to do well on both scores.
Yeah, that is the third point, what we didn't delve into. This is the production side, which is
Sure.
super important because if you can't facilitate the demand, then you can't be that popular. So this, if you want, it's a triangle. It's not a coin with two parts. You also have to deliver, right? And this is often underestimated. That an artist needs a big body of work if she is successful on the market and also on in the exhibition circuit. You need to have works that are filling the white walls, right? And what is also important is that you as an artist are able to come up with a certain level. So when a gallery plans for an exhibition or a museum, they often don't know what will come because it's a future exhibition and they want to show you new stuff. And so they have to have this, they have to have the trust that you will deliver on a certain standard. Yeah, that you firstly can deliver, that you have stuff, but that is also a certain, let's say, quality. But it's a difficult word, but yeah, that it expects that your expectations as a curator are met in terms of delivery and in terms of that you can actually show it and it's not a disgrace to have that on the wall. I think this is super important
And
next
again,
to the
again
accept.
that comes back to your framing of ArtFacts the background framing is very definitely almost like a Marxist analysis of capitalism where so it's also important that your work, your production, the team, if you like, or single person is the artist is producing sufficient works to fuel the expansion of that market.
Yes, with a high risk, right? When taste shifts.
Sure. As we see a lot of the time. I
Yeah, yeah,
remember,
yeah.
we both know Anders Pettersson and Art Tactic. He's been a guest on this podcast before, and he does a lot of these confidence surveys where he reaches out to anonymized galleries across the world to see whether they've got confidence in a certain artist continuing. And there was what was really interesting was his report, Art Tactic's reports on Damien Hirst after the 2008 Sotheby's sales. That will this be a bubble that will burst? And kind of the idea, everyone kept saying, yeah, it will burst, but for some reason it continued. But thinking about Damien Hirst and production, consumption, and supply demand, I think we can safely say that that is why historically artists have created limited editions because there's less labor to continue the Marxist analogy, involved in creating a series of prints that you only need to sign. That doesn't take much time. And of course, digital now, with Damien Hirst famously, I mean, I bought a Damien Hirst from Sedition, the web platform, early in the millennium, and I think it cost me £12, but it was one of a series of 20,000 digital works that I could display on a screen on my wall. I had a certificate of ownership, and the idea would be that I could trade when they sold out. I could actually sell it back and get a profit on my original investment. And in many ways, that idea of the multiples has continued to develop. Maybe you could comment on that. It's like a Walter Benjamin problem, isn't it? Maybe the idea of multiple works of art based on the one work of art.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the art, the problem, one of the problems of the art market is that creativity is something that it's in us. It's in every human being. So there are actually billions of creative people around, and there is only a fraction that devotes their life to the art world of these. but creativity is not the problem, right? So because there is an overwhelming amount of creativity, you have to somehow artificially uh, um, make an artificial scarcity out of this commodity, what is in abundance there, right? So you have a formal environment about what is art, how it is displayed. So you create a whole formal setup around it, so that you exclude already a lawyer that writes a wonderful letter to the counterpart, what he considers or she considers an artwork in terms of litigation or whatever, that is not an artwork because of our formal framework. So this is one way. And another way is to produce things that are unique in itself because they are paintings, for example. Paintings, even if you do the same thing over and over, it is still a unique work of art. It will be different to the other painting, even if you paint the same thing. When we then come to editions, this needs to be monitored. You need to have a legal framework around that. So in a highest form of formalization around this whole thing, because you can actually print endlessly. When you print lithographies or the classical way, then of course you have, the quality will get lower. So there's a certain also physical end, but normally you do this by contract. Now we are entered, when we enter the digital age, we come into a even bigger problem, and we have to enforce much more formal regulations around it, because and I told this in I think it's Sotheby's Institute last week or 2 weeks ago, that when you have a fridge with a beer in there and somebody comes and steals your beer is still there. So the quality, there's no difference in quality when you copy a digital subject. And this is actually what killed the digital photography, because there was a German collector and a businessman who had to default. And it turned out that digital prints with the same number appeared in museums in New York and Australia and Sydney. This was a killing. I mean, this was a killer. When you have that, then you know that even the legal frameworks that are quite tough do not work even in a museum environment. That was a killer for this market, because when you own a digital painting, what is it worth? You can endlessly copy it, right? And without any. You only can have a legal framework or a computerized framework with crypto software around it, like a blockchain system, what is not handy to operate still. And then you can say, I own this, but you own it only in a formal administrative computerized. You can't own a digital. There's nothing. It's not even air. It's just a magnetic impulse on a hard drive. That's it, right? So there's not even canvas and paint, not even a piece of paper, not even a tree. It's just nothing, right? And this makes it, in my point of view, very, very difficult for the digital art market. There are things that they do software around, so the other thing about the digital artwork is that it's, when you watch a movie, then you can watch this movie only a certain number of times. If the movie would be a theater play, like a Shakespeare play, you could maybe watch this same play over and over again, because it's performed by different actors. It's always a little bit different, and it's like a painting. It's shivers. It's every day a little bit different. But when it's digital, it's always the same. And you get bored with it. You get bored looking at it. It doesn't deliver anything new. And I think this is a problem they try to overcome with software that's changing the picture always. So it's a constant. It's never the same like it was a second before, but it still doesn't help with the with the factor of being unique. So I don't know. I can't give a prediction there, but I think it's difficult thing there.
It's a discussion that we're having all the time.
Yeah.
Alex Esterit was my recent guest on this podcast, and he's a renowned speaker on where digital's going. And Alex he I remember he lectured to our students, and there was one point where he was trying to, I think, put across to the new students that why digital art can be spiritual, and he put a cyberpunk next to a Byzantine token. This was a token that was invested with Christian spirituality in the Byzantine period, and he said that he believes that cyberpunk image that is stamped at a certain moment and was surrounded by a kind of emotionalism because I was listening to some early podcasts of collectors of cyberpunks. And these weren't academics, these weren't intellectuals, they were ordinary blokes who were typically buying streetwear, drops of trainers and so on, and they were speaking about how proud they were to have number one of the series, but they weren't typical art collectors. So that was quite interesting as well about arguably a kind of democratization of the artistic image. But it seems to me that we're still in that moment of history where people are struggling to invest NFTs and digital art with that same je ne sais quoi, that spiritual quality that we see when we look at a Titian altarpiece in situ in the Frari in Venice, or I think that's what you're getting at there. And as you say, I have limited edition prints on my walls, mainly because I usually can't afford the original oil painting or sketch. But yeah, I often look at them and I have these problems about, is this really worth having or not?
I mean, it comes with a shift in society and towards it. There was an attempt with the cyberpunks and Twitter back in the day, like X now, that when you own a cyberpunk on a blockchain, then you can make your profile picture this cyberpunk, and it has then a kind of this Ethereum kind of shape around it. And this would tell everybody that you own that cyberpunk.
Yes.
And then this digital image becomes a Rolex, it becomes a status symbol because
Mhm.
you can't fake it. When it's on a blockchain, then it's clear. And when this is then part of the social media system like Instagram and all this, where your digital profile is set, and you can use these images as a Rolex kind of status symbol. I think that is a valid construction. It didn't break through. I mean, we know all what happened to X and what happened to Twitter. So, but if this might come back, and I will think so, that you will have a more formal approach on social media, that you probably have to send your passport, that it's really you, and this whole thing is more, not this Wild West, what it is now, with all this fake news and deep fake and whatever you want to call it, that this becomes a serious person in a digital way of yourself, like your representation in the digital world, then these images probably will become worse if they are on a blockchain. Then you can probably do something with this, but not now.
And of course, there's also the problem that what happens if that cloud storage disappears one day, which is quite possible with blockchain or any of these things. If that supplier disappears for economic reasons, perhaps, or technical reasons, you kind of lose all of that.
Yeah, okay. But when a world war comes and you might lose your your museum, it gets bombed or so.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there's plenty of examples of that. Oh,
In
no,
the this will take 4 minutes, from Kaliningrad to Berlin. There's
what do I
not
do
much
with my
time.
Yeah, when I hear that the Russian missiles are on their way to London, what do I do with my Picassos? You know,
Yes,
at least
there's
the
much
digital
space.
art might survive. But coming back to art facts, my question to you would be, what do you do with Beeple on art facts, for example, or don't you?
We listed. we list everybody. People appeared in auction first.
Yes.
This is not only to people, so not only to NFT artists, it also happened to Chinese artists. So back in the early 2000s, when Chinese art appeared in the West, it appeared through auction, not through exhibitions. This came later. It was just the other way around, as we used to do it, right? It's like they have communism and capitalism at the same time, so everything is like kind of the other way around. But this can happen. But my point is always, because people ask, why don't you put in awards and a catalogue raisonné and important articles or Instagram and all that? I think that we measure the formal appreciation by curators.
Yes.
And if an artist gains some attention, gains some momentum, and is recognized as an artist, because artists, everybody can call themselves an artist, and I said by nature we are all one, but in the art world somebody else has to say you are an artist. That's curator, right? This person has to say, yes, I believe you are an artist, then you are an artist. You can't say I'm an artist, I'm Picasso. There are lots of people probably thinking that, like there are lots of people thinking they are Jesus, but it's not them who decide that they are Picasso. It's the curators and the whole world, right? The outside world. So I lost a little bit my track here. How did I come?
Well, that just to fill in there, that's obviously the problem. We often discuss this in seminars in the Institute, that who comes first? Who creates taste? Is it Charles Saatchi as the wealthy art collector collecting young contemporaries, which are then later on, once Nicholas Sirota or Tate or MoMA or Pompidou realize that this artist is selling for lots of money? Is that the moment that the in inverted commas objective academic non-market orientated curator of a public validating collection buys that work when it reaches the problem, of course, for museum curators, they don't have the budget to speculate in emerging artists. So my theory would be that that begins with the collectors on the market, and the moment that enough collectors are buying that artist's work, i.e. they are considered an artist by collectors investing in them financially, that is when the non-financial museums will buy one. I mean, would you agree with that process, or do you think the museum curators come first?
Partly because this the art world, what we normally think about it, what you mainly taught is the market part of it, where you have galleries and also museums, art fairs mainly. But there are other pillars. There are the teachers, for example, which are artists and that they teach art in school. They maybe don't appear nowhere, but they are also part of this whole thing. And there's a third word that is, I wouldn't say commissioned, but this is the installation artists that work on the subject of the formal practice of the day. Speaking about native, destruction of European colonialism, you have a Picasso and then you think, okay, what appeared in Tibet at the same time and with the Eskimos as well? So you put in an Eskimo artist and a Tibetan art, but where do you get them, right? So curator, you have to then look into that, and there will be people that have produced art during that time, so you can make this show. So I think this group of artists that is producing certain content that enriches a show are also there, and they're completely outside the market often because they do installations that are unsellable. They will be destroyed after the show, right? Nobody can store the stuff. When you talk to museums administrators behind the closed doors, they will tell you we just destroy all the stuff. And where should we store that, right? So this is also a pillar in the art world. What is quite important, that plays a major role in biennials and all these competitions, but then get mixed up with painters and market artists, so that they also appear in there. But it's a second pillar.
It's so
this
very
thing next to the market.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. And this year's Venice, I don't know if you managed to get to Venice for this art biennale.
Finissage.
Sorry?
I will go to the finissage. I have an invitation there. It's the
No,
24th
I
of.
mean this current year.
Yeah.
Went. You went.
No, I will. And in November, it's a finissage. I don't
Oh,
go. I
sorry, the
didn't.
finissage. I thought you said vernissage. I was going to say, well,
I
we're when are you going? Because I'm taking our MA Art business students in November, so we might be there at the same time. But
yes, it will be 24th, I think.
yeah.
If I,
Well, yeah. But I've already been because we went with we took last year's students in June, and that's an example, of course, where you're seeing an awful lot of work, like commodifiable
Mhm.
paintings, mobile paintings hanging on walls next to Frida Kahlo. So I was thinking when I was looking at those rooms, we all recognize the Frida Kahlo self-portrait in the room, and the others we don't because they've deliberately put these unknown artists that aren't yet selling on the market, most of them, or
Yeah.
they're selling only locally in Latin American nations, galleries very locally, and that's what ArtFacts would do. So they would say if that relatively unknown artist has been shown alongside Frida Kahlo at the Venice Biennale, which itself has its own point system,
Yes.
that would rise them in your rankings. Am I right in saying?
Yes. It would push them up.
Push them up a
Uh,
bit in the rankings,
yeah,
yeah.
but you need
Even though they're
no.
not on the market.
If you're an artist that comes out of nowhere, it would push you right up to the top. But it's very difficult to sustain that, right?
Absolutely.
Because what comes after the Venice Biennale? It has to be a
Yeah.
Whitney show, PS1,
Yeah.
Tate Modern, uh, you
Well,
name
I
it,
think
right? If you don't get that, then it's only one way. It's a
exactly.
one.
And I think a few lucky artists, such as
Mm,
those, were seen by international galleries who took them on board. But we're talking about a very small percentage, I suspect.
yes.
But
It's
that I think that this year's Biennale is a very good example of you're seeing really amazing art with fantastic ideas, but will it last? Will it go into museums one day and then be validated forever, as it were?
yeah, yeah, it can't, right? Because it is in a way it sounds stupid, but it reminds me of the startup business where you have, a certain idea now. It's large language models or so, and you have to woof, they all appear, all these billionaires invest in this, but just one will survive.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the same with, I think, trends in artist practice. This black art renaissance. I mean, boosh, this is just a bucket of
Yes.
black artists. Wow, and you think wow, and it's wow. You go to the Whitney and you think wow, where does all this stuff come from? Right out of nowhere, boom, it's there. But what will remain? It will be a handful of these
Yes.
artists.
And that what will remain, presumably in your view, would be those works that somehow have an equilibrium of your cultural rank with market rankings. So they've got to, at some point, they've got to start appearing on the secondary market and the auction market, which is quite ironic that it's resold works that are creating the data that people like you and I, my students, have to use because it's very, very hard to get prices from commercial galleries. So we're using this data, which is based on this sort of auction market.
Yeah, but this is actually the validation, right? That this artist is sustainable. Without the
Yes,
auctions, we don't have that, right? Because the galleries need to keep to play this model of scarcity. It's a binary system, right? Where because you have the overwhelming amount of creativity, you have either zero interest in the artist,
yes,
or the art is on a short list, is on a list from the galleries, and the galleries say, I don't sell to you. Only if you buy 10 other artworks from other artists, or if you pay 10 times the price that is paid in auction. Because we are sitting on this stuff and we want to control the market, or you have to write a letter that you will never resell it or only to us,
yes.
and have it in a public collection forever, not in your home, this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's where the gallerist is controlling that market in their own market.
it's important in my point of view, because if they
Yeah.
if they do that, because our mind can only process a certain amount of art.
Mm.
I remember back in the 90s, we had these art fairs with nearly 400 or 300 galleries or something. Art Cologne, I remember, and the biggest time was you got a headache. You couldn't digest this anymore. It was kind of torture in the end, right? So
Yes.
you need to limit that.
Yes.
Uh,
I guess that's what academic art history has done, because
as
my
well.
students are often very, very downhearted that they don't recognize most of the names when they go to, say, a Sotheby's auction preview, particularly of old masters, where obviously the big names that they've learnt about in their history of art, Botticelli and so on, then they're not seeing those because obviously those are in museums and they're we all know that. But it's quite interesting that you get all of this other stuff suddenly appearing that is the art history has to be selective. It
Yes.
doesn't, I often say to students, it doesn't necessarily mean that those artists are actually better than the ones that have got forgotten, and
No
that's, you know,
significance, or they are, as you said, are a token
yeah.
for a certain period. Like
Yeah.
they stand representative for that
Yes.
time, and yeah.
Marek, maybe you could say a little bit about the business model of ArtFacts and the staffing structure. How many of you work on ArtFacts, and are they full-time, part-time?
Uh, I mean, the company size fluctuates with all the ups and
Sure.
downs. I don't know how it emerged. And now we are around 20 something, maybe 24
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
The
Are they
editorial
all
team,
are they all based in, do you have an office in Berlin or are they just working from
we have
home?
an office in Berlin, but it's abundant.
Oh,
Since COVID,
yeah.
everybody enjoys home office, right? Nobody has to teach in front of students. So we have an office, but the office is, I mean, we have a team in London. Our CEO is in London and our business developer is in London. So I would say the major people running the whole show are in London. And here in Berlin, it's the founders, Stine and me, and the programming team or the data science team, stuff like that. What is surrounded a little bit more around me is here, but they're also often not there. The editorial team is spread around, so we are interested in having a multicultural diversity in our editorial team because of languages and writings, Hebrew, like Mandarin, and since the Ukrainian war, we have a team in Odessa. That's the Ukrainian art scene is very, very active on ArtFacts because they want to, shed light on there's a Ukraine, it's a country, it's not Russia. We have our own artists, our art history, so they push a lot of content in there. So we in the last years have been so we had some focus there. Yeah, so this is
Yeah,
basically
I think a lot of a lot of players in the art world are now realizing, like with this year's Biennale, where the focus was on many of these Southern Hemisphere artists, like Africa, which has been successful, as you said earlier, but particularly Latin America has kind of got forgotten by the Northern Hemisphere in the traditional Western market. So I guess companies like yours are also trying to mirror that and trying to become more diverse and make sure that ArtFacts is also representing gallerists and artists from the Latin American nations.
yes, this is a balancing act, right? Especially Latin America has always been a problem.
Hmm.
It's because I think the internet did not play in the past that role. They didn't bother to publish this on the internet.
Hmm.
It's a different way of, living with artists, maybe also a little bit more conservative.
Hmm.
We had a lot of we had a team many years. We have a strong Spanish team,
Hmm.
and we had most of our editorial was Spanish speaking, and we were participating every Arco in Madrid, and they have a special relation to Latin America. So there were some bridges we could make, but it is problematic as well as China and
Hmm.
South Korea. These are our. Japan is also a headache.
Yes.
It's such a
Yeah.
sophisticated country, but in terms of properly maintaining on your website your exhibition archive and all that, this is not existing there.
Yeah.
And in China, it's it's only WeChat, no websites. It's
Oh,
difficult.
yeah.
So
Quite hard
there's
to embrace.
we try to overcome this bias, but there's a cultural bias and a technical bias that is preventing us to be unbiased.
I think that, to be fair, I think everybody has to, you know, we've seen this happening over the last few years with Black Lives Matter and the feminist movement of artists, where galleries were positively discriminating and bringing out more women artists, quite rightly, into the galleries to make more of a 50. We've seen all of these things happening, and I guess like ArtFacts is trying to also keep up with that, and it can be problematic and difficult at times, as you say, because the kind of data you're looking for doesn't exist in some of those nations, not necessarily for bad reasons, but for interesting reasons, but it's very difficult for you to access.
Yeah, because we have this mantra of factuality. What I said
Yes.
is so we have over 1 million exhibitions since the Salon de Refusé in there, 1860, or
Yeah.
before. Or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each of this entry has a source.
Yes.
Each of this entry was manually checked in the end.
Yes.
So, and when we have no proof, we don't enter it. This is why biographies often, people then call, hey, why isn't this and this show in there? And they say, we need a proof. Otherwise, we
Yeah.
won't put it in there. It's because we wanted to put this alongside to auction records. And auction records is everything is proven. Everything is, with bookkeeping and all that. It's there. This auction took place and there was a bidder. We don't
Yeah.
know if the money really, exchanged hands, but we know that the auction did take place and the same level of confidence we want for the exhibitions.
Yeah.
And
So
this makes
yes, so that, Marek, I'm aware of the time now, and I would maybe in the future, maybe in a year's time, we could do another podcast where we talk more about. I think listeners would be very interested in your memories of that art world with Art Cologne, and growing up working in that gallery, and
yeah.
what's happening to Art Cologne and in Germany in particular now, and in the Eastern European sector. That would be very interesting, I think, in the future. But I'd just like to finish by just to say that many of the listeners of this podcast are my students, and other students are just starting a career in the art world. I wonder whether you had any kind of one piece of advice that you might give to a person studying at the moment and about to enter that art world.
Yeah, whatever you do, from my point of view, if you are working as an artist or a curator or gallery or whatever profession you want to follow in the or want to step into the art world, networking and relationship building, I would say, is the number one,
Mhm.
because it's a word that is without knowing people, you are kind of lost, right? So you have to be open-minded, and you have to, if you can't stand openings
Yes.
and have this, senseless discussions with people to kill time, if you can't stand that, it's difficult, at least in the primary world. I don't know so much about the
Yeah,
secondary.
and I think a lot of the current students had suffered during lockdown, that with this notion of being able to socialize, in a
Mm,
physical bricks and mortar gallery. I was at an opening in of a Chinese artist from Tsinghua University yesterday, and there were several of my alumni from 10 years ago. Chinese people still living in London were there, and I was that kind of illustrates what you're saying, that they're there at the opening of this guy's scroll paintings, but they're networking with there were collectors there. It's a different kind of world down that end of Chelsea. So yeah, and I was thinking, actually, you're doing the right thing, that and I was speaking to them again, I was introducing them to people. So that networking, yeah, I agree. If you can develop the confidence to do that, then
yes,
that's the way forward.
like an easy, casual being with people. This is important.
Yeah.
And then the next one I would say is find a unique niche
Yes.
to stand out. This
Yes.
is like we did with ArtFacts. What do you do with Sotheby's Institute? What is kind of solitaire in a way, as much as possible, even if it doesn't, earn you an income. But
Yes.
within the art world, you have to make a standing on your niche, and you have to carefully curate that and present it also.
Yeah. And
This is
these days, very important that you have a serious Instagram site, which I constantly encourage my students to do, not just a personal one. Anyway, Marek, on behalf of all the listeners, thank you very much for giving us your time today. And it was a fascinating discussion about art facts, but also particularly the digital art world. And I hope that we might speak again in future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.